Hi, welcome to Talking Books and Stuff, the program that talks all about books and writing and stuff. Here's your host, Dennis Rimmer.
Hello, welcome back. It's Talking Books and Writing and Stuff, and today we're talking books and writing and the White House in the US of A with Andrew Pyper, award-winning novelist based in Toronto. So, Mr. Pyper, how did a nice, young, upstanding Canadian boy like you get involved in a horror story about the US White House?
Well, it was, quite accidental. I mean, the novel "The Resident" is about the administration of Franklin Pierce, who is a very little known, even today, even by people who are interested in the White House, a little known one-term president from 1853 to 57. But I'd never heard of Franklin Pierce before I stumbled on him. I was researching haunted houses generally, and just for recreation. I wasn't looking for a new subject matter for a novel in any official capacity. I was just wasting my time on the internet, as we all
do.
Yes, and so I stumbled upon the supernatural history of the White House. The ghost stories. A lot of famous buildings have this, of course. Ghost stories. Lincoln's ghost, and some of these things I'd already heard of, but I had never heard of Jane Pierce, who was First Lady to Franklin, and she was a woman, and they were a couple who endured unimaginable loss just before the inauguration, and whereby all three of their children died close together in timing, and the last of whom, Benny, died just weeks before the inauguration in a bizarre train accident in which he was the only fatality. And so Jane moved into the White House under conditions of enormous grief, and she went into the second floor apartments, which is the residential part of the White House, and she refused to attend any social functions, and she spent her time writing letters addressed to her dead son, Benny, pleading with him to return to her. And according to her letters, he did. Not just in sort of, phantasmical form, but again, according to her correspondence, he came back to her in bodily form, came to stand by her bed and conversed with her. And so as soon as I read that, I thought, okay, this is a novel.
And is that one of those aha moments? So writers, mystery and fiction writers, don't you always have a what if kind of scenario? So what was your what if question for this book, The Residents?
Well, yes, in fact, that's true. And I think for me, it was the what if was, what if Jane's letters, what she reports in her letters, what if it were true? What if it wasn't just the heartbreaking fantasy of a grief-stricken mother? What if Benny did return to her, and perhaps with him came other spirits, other entities or presences that were attracted to the White House because they saw through it an opportunity to attack a larger population, to corrupt the presidency and the very idea of democracy and all the things the White House and the United States is supposed to stand for. And so that was, my what if was to enter into a ghost story of unique kind, because it doesn't just involve the people living in a house. It involves a marriage. It involves the presidency. It involves the very foundation, however perhaps falsely built, of an entire nation.
And we're talking with Andrew Pyper about the newest book in his collection of best-selling books, The Residents. And Franklin Pierce U.S. president. The only time most people hear about him is on a Jeopardy question, or MASH, Hawkeye Pierce. I think his name was Benjamin Franklin Pierce, and he was from Maine as well. So maybe that's why he was called that.
I think that I had forgotten that. That's right.
And I lived in the U.S. for about 20 years in Washington State, and I don't think I saw, all the high schools down there are named after former presidents, Kennedy, Lincoln, Washington, Carver, all that kind of stuff. But I never saw a Franklin Pierce High School. So,
it's funny. I came upon, again accidentally, they did a presidential poll, and I saw the name, this college, a small liberal arts college in Pennsylvania, I believe, called Franklin Pierce College, and I Googled them up, and yes, indeed, there is a low-ranking but real college named after Franklin Pierce, and so I immediately ordered a T-shirt and was told they don't ship to Canada.
What? So you'd have to get one of those post office boxes just across the border, but of course you can't even cross now to get that. So
no.
And so the ghostly images, and it's creeps, like the first line of the book. I'm just flipping pages here. If people are wondering what's going on, that's just me. Something occurred to me last night. Jane Pierce looked up at her husband, her bluish lips tight in what was for her a signal of playfulness. In a dream, the opposite of a dream, she said. So, pretty creepy right off the start. And it also tells us that Jane, with tight bluish lips, and that's her idea of playfulness. She's kind of a depressive character when I did some research on her. Yeah, she's probably had depression-type syndromes way back, even in childhood.
Oh, yes, very much so. And that begs the question, when you research Franklin and Jane, they are a very interesting couple. And so I was intrigued by what brought them together and what kept them together, even following their administration or their time in the White House, where they left with some eagerness. They had a retirement that, quite surprisingly, was very close and intimate and successful. And the reason it's so puzzling is because, as you've mentioned, Jane was very emotionally and physically fragile. She was, through her life, always complaining of a variety of ailments, all of them kind of mysterious and without a cure. But she was also, compared to her sisters, even the Appleton sisters, her elder sisters were known as regarded as being very pretty and robust, wonderful dancers, attractive in all respects. And so was Franklin. Franklin was universally regarded as handsome and appealing, and had a very resonant voice, and people fell in love with him, including Nathaniel Hawthorne, the great American novelist, adored Franklin and wrote a very glowing biography of him in the campaign for the presidency, and they were both students at Bowdoin College together. But he had here's this magnetic, handsome outdoorsman, and here's a brittle, fragile, not as pretty as her sisters girl. Why did he choose her and she him? I mean, it was an unlikely pairing, and so that was one of the questions I wanted to answer in the book.
And it would be like almost opposites attract, right? And there was also a passage in the book where you're talking, I think Jane is listening to the boys outside the window running around and laughing and joking, and she can't even relate to that kind of stuff, it seems like.
No, she always had a very dour imagination. Though lively, she was known as for example, she was a fairly gifted pianist. And, but, I sort of imagine her as, creating her own melodies that are hypnotic, but at the same time unsettling and frightening. She had a Gothic inclination always. And so I think that's why I propose that's what made her so fascinating to Franklin. She was, precisely because she was unlike those other kind of rosy-cheeked lasses who were giggling around him when he at social functions and dances. Jane wasn't like that. She was the one in the corner who was shy and nervous about these things, and yet she had an aura of mystery about her, and even an element of danger that I imagine Franklin being attracted to.
And we're talking with Andrew Pyper, Pyper, talking about his latest novel, The Residence. We'll get back to that in a moment, but a little bit about yourself. So you went to high school, university, more university, and then law school, and then passed the bar, or whatever they call it in Ontario, and then you were 28 maybe, and decided, who the heck wants to be a lawyer? So why is it I've discovered more and more people who lawyers end up hating it. What's the problem with the law that makes people turn against it once they get inside it?
Well, that's a complicated question, or a complicated one to answer, because I think there's various reasons why people tend to leave the law in a way that they don't tend to leave, let's say, medical practice or something like that. I think the answer lies in the broad reasons that people go into the law in the first place. So, I think law school tends to be a reservoir for very generalized talent. You need to be intelligent, yes, but that intelligence doesn't have to be particularly sharp in any one direction. And so it is an answer to the question, and as it was an answer to me when I was asking myself the question, what now? What am I going to do, professionally with my life, having concluded that I wasn't going to pursue a PhD, and I didn't have that kind of sensibility or talent for that. And law school was, I think, I'm smart enough for that. And apparently you can get jobs afterward. And so I kind of, for all the wrong reasons, went into it. And that's why at the end I sort of thought, well, I guess I could do this, but I don't particularly want to. And then I sort of ran away, as it were, to a small town where the rent was cheaper than Toronto, and wrote a novel. Not with a view to sort of thinking this is good, I'm going to make a career out of it, because I knew well enough that was extremely unlikely. I did it because I really always wanted to, and that was my reward to myself for having finished, having become a lawyer, but then I luckily never had to actually be one.
And then you also, in one of your bios, says you had an ambition to have a book published by the time you were 30. Now, did that actually come about?
It did, yes. Yeah, right under the wire at 30, I had my collection of short stories published.
And that led to other things?
It led to other things. Most fortuitously, it led to a literary agent approaching me and saying, "I'd like to represent you on the basis of this book," which is a small press book. I mean, it wasn't. It didn't change the world in any way. And I remember telling her, "Well, this is wonderful, but I have nothing for you to sell. I mean, I don't have anything." And she said, "Oh no, you will." And she was right, and so I as I mentioned, I went away to a smaller town, to Peterborough, Ontario, and I wrote a novel, my first novel, Lost Girls, and lo and behold, she was able to sell that book in Canada initially, and then I was at that time completely out of money. I was broke, and so I was going around town delivering my resume to different bars to be a bartender, which that had been my job through university. And I thought, well, I guess I'll be a bartender in Peterborough for the rest of my day. Sounds okay, actually.
Yeah.
But she pulled out. I mean, within a week, on the Monday, she sold the rights to this book and the next book in a 2-book deal in the U.S. and the U.K. and the film rights were sold all within a week. And everything changed for me in the sense that I was able to write full time, at least for a window of time after that, and I've been able to do it ever since.
Andrew Pyper is with us. His latest book is The Residence. Lots of other books out there that you may have heard of. And let me just scroll down here and get them. Kiss Me, that was the first one. And then
That's right.
Yeah, and Lost Girls, The Trade Mission, The Wildfire Season, The Killing Circle, The Guardians, The Demonologist, The Damned, and The Homecoming, and also this one. So you're turning them out on quite a regular basis. So what kind of daily writing routine, Andrew Pyper, do you have?
I try to keep things sort of, as office-like as possible. I work at home, and so I have my office is on the third floor of the house. And so in the morning I get up and make lunch we have 2 children, school age, and so either make their lunch or breakfast, or I get them to make it. Grab a cup of coffee, and once they're out the door, I shuffle up to the office and get straight to work. I find personally that I'm sort of I wouldn't say I'm at my best, but I'm the least soft-minded in the morning, and so I try to get the writing done first because I feel sharpest. I've got my sleep. I have a big, jug of coffee, and then leave the other stuff, whether it's, paying the bills or doing the taxes or, business calls in the afternoons. And then I had the relief of having, I've got my words behind me today. I've done the main work. I find that that's helpful too. But it's been really a process of learning how to make something that's, on the one hand, quite inspiration-driven, quite magical, the writing itself or creating the story, but rendering it in a business-like way, because the inspiration, you can't wait for it to strike. You have to kind of normalize it and teach it, train it to come, or at least seem like it's come on a daily basis. And I think that's the real core challenge.
And I hear a lot of people, would-be writers, who say, when I have time, I will write, but without trying to sound too pontificating type here. I mean, if you want to be a writer, you have to write. That's it. You have to write. You got to find that time. Carve out an hour every day, or a half hour, or 2 hours, whatever it takes. And then you sit down and you write. And you don't talk about it, and you don't go online and say, well, should I get an agent first, or should I use a typewriter? Which I've seen online, all these various questions that people are coming up with, which maybe are legitimate in their minds. But I think all you need is a pen and a paper and your butt in the chair, wouldn't you say?
I agree completely. Yes, I think it's hard. I think it's hard for new writers or writers perhaps who have been writing for a while but seeking mainstream publication or an agent or something on a commercial foothold. It's hard, I think, to accept for some that it's really a matter of creating the best piece of work you can, and have that piece of work be judged as better than other pieces of work. That it really is a matter of the best work winning. And I think there can be a very human tendency to look at, the game is rigged. How maybe it's about getting more Twitter followers, or sort of going to parties when there used to be parties. Going to a party or a conference and making friends with a powerful agent or editor, it's a schmoozing thing. It's hard to accept that it's not. It's not about any of those things. It really is about the work.
And we're talking with Andrew Pyper. The latest book is The Residence, a number of other ones behind it. Do you have any films and TV things that are actually in the works right now?
Yes, there's always been, those things going on over the last 10 or 20 years with me, but nothing has actually come to fruition to date. But those option fees are always very welcome, because it's money for typically not doing anything when you're the author of the book. But right now is a very busy time for me in that regard, and so there's nothing I can really talk about, as I've been contractually obliged not to. But there's about 5 projects in different stages of development on TV and film projects. And so it would be really wonderful if one of them could actually be made, and I could prove that I wasn't just lying about this for 20 years.
Yeah, it seems like they've been underway for a long time, some of them from what I've been reading about. But also right about now, this last couple of years seems to be a good time for long-form television, I'll call them adaptations with Netflix and things like that, for 8 and 10 chapter stories that are well produced, well written, well directed, well acted, and yet you're not tied down to 7 years worth of churning out hour-long dramas every day kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I think that's true. It really is a really sort of golden moment for novelists. Not just in respect to their books being sought by TV and film producers, but also the novelists themselves, if they have an interest in doing this. The door is ajar to them being included as an active participant in these projects, either writing it, creating it, show running it in some cases, being a producer on it. And so that was not that long ago, I would say, as recently as 5 years ago, that would have been extremely uncommon. I mean, you'd have to be Stephen King or J.K. Rowling to be allowed into that room. And now that's considerably more common. And so I hope it continues, because I think writers and novelists have been kept out of that particular sausage making for a long time, and for no good reason, really. I think the Hollywood's always had a prejudice that, look, there's screenwriters and TV writers, and then there's novelists, and they're apples and oranges, and they really can't be in the same place together. And I think that's being slowly shown to be false.
There's an old joke I just heard, actually. It's probably so old even I don't know it, about the starlet in Hollywood was so mixed up she went home with the writer.
That's right. That's right. Yes, where the writer is always told in these meetings, when producers or studios are interested in your book, there's a brief moment, it's very, very brief, when they will flatter you and say, we're all here because of the writer. No one, there wouldn't be a Hollywood. I wouldn't have my big house in the Hollywood Hills if it weren't for writers. And then you sign the contract, and oftentimes they never call you again.
And it's like, Willie Shakespeare, yeah, we love this story, Romeo and Juliet, that's great, but can you make them 2 men on Mars?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, just a small change.
We're talking with Andrew Pyper, latest novel, The Residents. Back to something almost serious for a minute. Is it... in your real life, is it hard to relate to, the household, the day-to-day affairs, when you've got these stories that are always swirling around, taking up space in your mind, and somebody will ask you a question, you'll say, huh? Oh, sorry, what was that? Are you always on the job? The job never ends.
Yes, that's precisely true. It is a challenge because, you want to be... I want to be an attentive husband and father and friend and brother. And I think we're all distracted in different ways. I don't think it's necessarily unique to writers, but I think what is unique to writers is that we can sometimes unexpectedly do our best work at a moment when we aren't even trying. It could be, yes, as it's, you're sort of, could you pass the orange juice, please? That you have this idea of how to, get your way out of this scene that's been a problem, or some aspect of your character that might be revealed. And so it's not really your fault. I mean, you can't be blamed that the lightning strikes at that particular moment, and you maybe have to mull it through at that moment or go off and write it down. And so it can lead to a certain amount of eccentricity. But it is real, and I think I like to think that I'm reasonably, a good person to live with, but I do know, I have talked to other former spouses or partners of writers who have, horror stories of having to live with someone who, from the outside appears to be extremely self-involved and distant, and sort of 25% of the there, 25% there all the time. So I try to be better than that.
And we're talking with Andrew Pyper. Latest book is The Residence. That's Residence, all about ghostly hauntings in the U.S. White House under the presidency of the famous Franklin Pierce from Maine, one-term president. And do you have anything? What's in the works right now? Can you talk about anything like that?
Oh, sure. Yeah, it's actually a fun announcement I was allowed to make yesterday. I'm doing an audio exclusive novel. I've written an audio exclusive novel for Audible, which is the audiobook arm of Amazon, that is coming out next year, as well as a 10 half-hour episode audio drama. So essentially a radio play with sound effects and music and actors, professional actors, that Audible is also doing with the same main characters from the novel, that is also going to be released next year, 2021. And it's called Oracle. The whole series is called Oracle. It's a psychological mystery thriller. And so that's really been really sort of fun to work on, and new for me to write scripts. I've done script writing before, but usually the presumption is there's a camera and a microphone. Mm-hmm. In this case, there's just a microphone and sound. And so to tell a story just with words, voices, and sound has been really, really fun. And I really love where we've landed with it. So that's going to be really exciting next year, I think.
We'll look forward to that. We're talking with Andrew Pyper. The book out now is The Residence, and you should listen for the Oracle series coming out soon, let's say. And before we go, any words of advice to those who want to be writers?
I would say, I would say don't listen to advice, but I think having said that, I'll provide one piece which I really think is worthwhile, and it's been for me personally, very hard won. And that is, to hang, if you are working on something that you really believe in and you're excited about, and you completed it, at least in a first draft form, hang on to it. Get other people to read it. Maybe even hire a freelance professional editor to work with you on it. Read it out loud to yourself over and over. Don't let it out of your sight. Don't submit it to editors or agents before you can honestly look at yourself in the mirror and say, this is really the best work I can do. Because despite what other people might say, you don't really get two kicks at the can, and you don't want to let something out that's like, oh, that wasn't quite the best, because people will, you're sort of spoiling the soil. And so, that's something I've had to learn the hard way, and then that would be my one, I think, ironclad piece of advice.
So when you're going to send something out there, make it sure it's the best you could ever do.
Yep. And that's hard to do, of course, but you do your best to do your best.
Do your best to do your best. Wise words from Andrew Pyper, author of The Residence. One more thing, you must have a website. Everybody has a website.
Yeah, it's www.andrewpyper.com. And I think I'm also frequently on Twitter sort of saying random, ridiculous things at Andrew Pyper.
At Andrew Pyper?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Well, we're on Twitter a lot too, so we'll try to hook up. Andrew Pyper, that's Pyper with a Y, Pyper. The book is The Residence, the one that's out right now. And we thank you very much, sir, for your time today.
Thanks so much, Dennis.
Thank you for visiting with us today. This is Talking Books and Stuff with Dennis Rimmer. Contact him at dennis@talkingbooks.tk. Thank you, and may all the good news be yours. Oh, and don't forget to check out his book, The Great Canadian Notebook, available across Canada and at amazon.ca.